So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our summer edition of ACM Chicago this evening. I think this is the first time that we've had an actual summer meeting. I don't know in the past whether we've actually had that. We've usually stopped for the remaining of the year and resumed in September. So thank you for your time for coming this evening. We have a kind of a different type of topic or so that we have this evening, and we're going to make it more interactive. So our previous have been on webinars or so and on topics. Today we're going to talk about careers, and I think this is really very timely, especially during this time. You know, we've had the pandemic last year, and basically, people are looking in terms of how they want to change their career or go to a different job. So we're really very excited tonight to actually have a bunch of panelists that will be discussing about this career development and career stuff. And these are panelists that have been previous speakers at ACM Chicago. So we thank them for coming this evening. And of course, we thank you, the audience, for coming here as well. If you have any questions for the panelists, you can type them in the chat, and then we'll try to go through each individual one, and then we'll let you know whether you can start speaking your particular question. So just a bit of introduction. So we'd like to welcome members of IEEE Computer Society Chicago, which we've done many ACM Chicago meetings with. So thank you for your support for in ACM Chicago. We also like to thank as well the members of Mid-America IT Connect Club, of which Vijay is here in the meeting. So we thank them for their support too as well, that we've collaborated during this time of doing our particular meetings. And then of course, ACM Chicago here. So thank you for your support of ACM Chicago. We wouldn't be successful, with these events if it wasn't for you to come and attend. So here are the URLs that you can, keep on connecting us with on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We have all of our previous meetings and webinars. If you've missed them, they are on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you'll know when the next, meeting was recorded. Okay, so without further ado, our moderator for this careers panel is Bruce Montes. So I'm going to ask Mark to introduce Bruce, and then Bruce will introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Tonight's presentation is with moderator Bruce Montes of Loyola University, and it's a really great choice for this presentation. He has a triple career in education, doing project management and development. He's covering nearly more of the bases than most of us do, so he's a great choice for moderator for everyone here tonight and our panelists. And here's a slide of our 4 panelists tonight, who have all been speakers, 3 of them this year and 1 a few years back. Maria Patterson, you can see below that we've included their name and all their talk. When you get these slides, you can just click on the links to go to the descriptions. So Maria Patterson, Nate Nichols, who spoke a few months ago, Jeff Solin a little earlier, and just recently Teri Grossheim. And we're going to give them all a chance to introduce themselves. Next.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Alvin and Mark. And hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Montes from Loyola University, Chicago. And as Mark had mentioned, I've had over 40 plus years in technology and IT management. And at the same time, I've also been an instructor at Loyola for the computer science department and the School of Continuing Professional Studies and Communication. So I've been at that institution for 40 years. So you're sitting, well, how does he talk about career change? Well, I've had a lot of change within all those 40 years at Loyola, not only in my roles and responsibilities, but in other things as well. So we'll talk more about that as we go, but let me ask Maria if she would share with us a little bit about herself. Thanks for joining us, Maria.
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Patterson. I have a little bit of a background in academia and industry and now civic tech. I started my career, I guess, with a PhD in astronomy. in New Mexico. Then I moved to Chicago. Last time I spoke with you all formally at the University of Chicago, where I was working on some big data and cloud pipelines. And I moved to University of Washington doing the same sort of thing in astronomy. Then I kind of switched gears and I moved to Indianapolis, where I am currently based. And I started working at a venture studio, so doing some big data pipelines for different startup companies. And then I last year moved into a fellowship in civic tech, where I work on as an AI expert for the White House Presidential Innovation Fellows Program with the Department of Labor. So as you can see, I don't know what I'm doing with my career either. So hopefully I'll be learning from the other panelists.
Thank you, Maria. And our second panelist is Nate Nichols. And Nate spoke recently at one of the meetings. And Nate, would you share with us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, everybody, for listening to us today. Hopefully it's useful. My name is Nate Nichols. I got my PhD in computer science from Northwestern in 2010, and then started working at the company I'm at now. Today was my 11-year anniversary, actually. And so I started working there for the first 5 years. I was actually an engineer, sort of slash engineer architect, building a lot of our core technology, and then moved to being a pretty bad product manager, but I moved to the product side and started out in product management. And now I'm a chief scientist. And so I work a lot with the engineers and the PM teams, but I'm not actually writing code on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Nate. Our third panelist is Jeff Solin, and Jeff, computer science teacher. Jeff, would you share a little bit with us before we start?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. My name is Jeff Solin. I'm a computer science teacher at Lane Tech High School. I've been there for this will be my 9th year. Taught at Northside College Prep for 11 years before that. I came to Lane to build up a big computer science program. So we have I was the second person to join the department. We now have 13 different computer science courses and about 2,000 kids in CS there. And I'm a career changer, but you have to go back a while. So I was did my undergrad in CS, and then I was a software engineer, starting at Motorola in Chicago, and then just wanted to do something different and didn't feel like what I was working on was the right kind of thing for me. And so I got into a graduate program through the Golden Apple Foundation at Northwestern University, and got a provisional teaching certification through that, and then never looked back. So lost a lot of money in the deal, but have never looked back in regret on the change in career, and it's been exciting and exhausting and everything else along the way. The talk that I had given was focused on a maker project. I designed and built a 4,000 square foot innovation lab at Lane, and I wrote curriculum for the courses that utilize that lab. So a lot of digital fabrication stuff, 3D printers, laser cutters, and stuff like that. And I had given a talk about my project that I did with my students. So anyway, thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And thank you, Jeff. And our last panelist is Teri Grossheim. And Teri, would you mind sharing a little bit with us before we get started?
Sure, Bruce. Thanks for having me. First of all, it's great to be on this panel. I'm really excited about the meeting tonight. A little bit about me. I currently am a lead technologist at Booz Allen Hamilton. I relocated to Washington, D.C. Area about 2 months ago. Prior to that, I lived in Chicago and worked over a 14-year period at a variety of institutions, everything from startups to corporate environments to academia as well. During that time, I went to DePaul University and earned my MBA while working full-time, going to school part-time, holding a variety of jobs, namely, I guess kind of my claim to fame. What's been fun for me over the last few years is I was an engineer that was part of the team that helped build Apple's supply chain out under Tim Cook. So that was really a cool thing for me to do during my now I'm about 20 years into my technology career. Prior to that, I mainly focused in the pro audio industry. I went to my undergrad, I studied recording technology at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. Did my undergraduate internships in the Bay Area post-September 11th, and then attended graduate school at IUPUI in Indianapolis. I know Maria had spent some time there as well. I had a graduate assistantship, so it was a really great opportunity for me to further my schooling in music informatics. So I got some exposure to information retrieval and data science before kind of how we see it in its incarnation today. So looking forward to chatting with you all, and I'll pass the mic back to Bruce.
Okay, thank you, Teri, and all panelists. And thank you all for joining us tonight. A couple notes as we kind of jump in. As Alvin mentioned, this is meant to be a kind of a community discussion tonight, although our panelists are probably going to help us a lot with kind of steering the discussion and help us kind of get to some things. And just a couple notes. One is feel comfortable, as Alvin said. If you have questions that come up, Alvin and Mark will be watching that chat line, and they'll mix your questions in where it makes sense to as we go. And the other thing I want to remind everyone is I hope you're not here coming for answers tonight, but maybe some ideas. Maybe we'll get some ideas. So each of us has our own kind of unique perspective on career, everyone here in the meeting. So this would be a good opportunity for us all to share a little bit about that. And maybe we can pick up some ideas as we kind of build our own kind of framework, if you will, for managing our own careers. And so a little bit less about technology tonight, and maybe a little bit more about our personal skill sets and how we manage hard skills, soft skills, all those sorts of things. So with that, let me kind of go back to something that Alvin said a little bit earlier when he mentioned the pandemic. And with the last year and a half now, maybe a little bit longer, people have had an opportunity, I think, to think about their careers a little bit more than maybe they have had in the past. Maybe we were on autopilot for a while with a number of things, and with the kind of the abrupt changes that took place with the pandemic. On an individual level, we had to make some adjustments, and on a company level, there's some adjustments. And some ways, some of those things are just beginning now. So as Alvin mentioned, this is a great opportunity to kind of just put our finger on the pulse and see what people think about some things. And I think the one thing that comes to mind here, rather than kind of changing careers, so that might be part of our discussion tonight. Some of us may be considering changing careers, but even within our own careers, maybe not necessarily changing totally, but thinking about just change within our own kind of specialty or discipline, some subtle changes, some major changes. So there's those kind of different paths that we may end up taking. But one thing that maybe a lot of people are thinking about now is their own career and their company. And so prior to the meeting, Teri had floated this idea that maybe we're thinking about change, and what value do we bring to our organization, or maybe what does our organization think about the value and our skill sets that we bring there? So if it's okay, Teri, let me kind of throw that question to you in this idea of how might we consider looking at our own skill sets and our own careers and what that means to bringing value to our organizations.
Sure. Thanks for bringing that up. When mentally preparing for this panel today, I had just thought about over the years how often I have to almost evangelize what value I'm bringing to the organization I'm with, because either I'm the most technical person or people around me don't quite understand what I'm doing. They're relying on me to kind of do the technical heavy lifting, so to speak. So they might not understand how much work I'm putting into something. They might not understand how much money I'm saving. They might not understand how I'm upgrading a process to make everything better around them, whether that's time, money, ease of use. So I believe it's up to an individual like myself to do things like, professional branding, writing blogs, talking about it, what I'm doing on social media, or even something as simple as coming to a staff meeting prepared to kind of say, hey, I know this wasn't on the agenda, but this is what I've been working on. I might have to make a handout or a presentation, and really kind of drive home, or you probably hear the buzz term manage up quite a bit. Things like managing up are things that you can do to kind of prove your value. So when your management's looking at what you're doing on a daily basis, they can kind of, yeah, Teri's a part of our team, and she should stay here. And they'll have a positive rapport with you. Hopefully that translates into promotions and, other maybe compensation, so to speak, versus, having those kinds of relationships with your employer where you kind of want to run out the door screaming. So, it kind of depends on the organization you're with and what you're doing. But that's really what I was thinking of, what value are you bringing to your organization, depending on what your role is. You might be doing something where you're on a team of developers, a team of software engineers. I've oftentimes have been kind of like the one lady show doing IT in certain organizations. I might be on a team that's, we're selling computing equipment, and it's like, how much revenue are you generating? So it's a financial aspect of it. So that's really what I was thinking of. That's probably the one thing that I've had to drive home on my own in my career over the last 20 years so far. So that's really why I kind of brought it up before the panel today.
Well, thanks. And Teri, that makes me think of something maybe a little bit related. And Nate, in a previous presentation, Nate talked about dashboards and how data is used at organizations and those sorts of things. To Teri's point, Nate, are people concerned about when their companies look at dashboards and data, and how do they translate that into what that means to their own career and things they might be able to do?
Yeah, thanks for that tee up, Bruce. I was when you were talking, Teri, I was mentally spinning up this whole storytelling rant to agree with you. Basically, like the way I agree with everything you said, and the way I think about that is making sure you're, it sounds kind of hokey, but making sure you're telling the story of the value you're providing. And I think that lots of times it's hard for like neuroscience. I'm not an engineer, but a lot of the work engineers do is pretty unsung work, right? It's kind of under the hood performance things, or it's restructuring the code base to get things out faster. And we track metrics of how many releases we can get out successfully a week and how many bugs are introduced and all that kind of stuff. But I think the more really sort of taking responsibility for your career and making sure that you're able to translate, like having those data points that sort of quantify your impact is awesome. But that's like step one. That's sort of the input into this kind of broader story you need to tell about the value you're adding. For us, and in most places, it's all about impact to the customer or your clients. So really tying that as much as possible, tying that to sorts of metrics and the things that like people on the business side care about, or making sure it tied into what your manager cares about, so that they can sort of the value you're providing, it can fit into their worldview in a way that makes sense. And they know, oh yeah, Nate's on that, or yeah, Teri crushed that last quarter, because you're able to sort of contextualize and kind of sell it to them in a way that resonates, then get their hands around.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, Nate. And that maybe a slight segue to kind of another idea here. It makes me think of teachers. And Jeff, you've got a lot of experience with this, and this last year has probably been a pretty kind of eye-opening experience for teachers in many ways. And so maybe the organization knows the value you bring already as a teacher, but you've been kind of put in a spot to have to make a lot of changes within your career as it relates to teaching, correct? And so how do we think about that? How do teachers think about that in terms of value when their organizations have almost asked them to totally change how they teach this last year?
Man, that is good and a tough question, because as Teri and Nathan are talking about it, my first instinct was things in education are very different than they are in the corporate world. It's been a long time since I've been in that kind of environment. So I was picturing different managerial structures and different ways that you show that you or sort of demonstrate your value to your organization. We don't have managers as much as we have, assistant principals and principals, and the stakeholders are humans, small humans. So we got kids and communications with families, and so it's a completely different structure. The way that I've found, well, at least I think I found I don't think much about how am I demonstrating value. I'm very much like I put my nose down and I just grind. But trying to think how to phrase this right. I think it's a pairing between having the right, I'm going to call it administrator, so I don't know how to parallel this directly, maybe a manager in the corporate world, but great things can happen when you have an educator that's ready and willing to take risks and try new things, and an administrator that's ready for what happens when things don't go right. So if it's a punitive relationship, which happens a lot in education, less will get accomplished. If a teacher is constantly afraid of what they're gonna try, it's not gonna work, and it definitely will not work sometimes. And if there's a sort of a concern about that going wrong or being a bad thing, then you get scared and then you don't want to do as much. And so I've been very lucky. I think it's luck, a lot of luck, being paired with administrations that I've worked with through my career that are very supportive and encourage you to take risks and try new things. And so being able to do that, like when I built my lab, for example, I've never built a maker lab before. I made some ridiculous mistakes doing it too. Some are embarrassing, some not so embarrassing, but like I was concerned about noise from CNC mills. And so I put them all in a room. We're in an old building built in 1930. So the infrastructure is a little bit limiting, but I had all my mills in there so it wouldn't be loud, thinking, well, then I can still talk to the students outside of that space. But I didn't think about ventilation. And if you're milling a bunch of wood or MDF, which has like formaldehyde in it and all kinds of things, I'm not trying to hurt children. I'm trying to teach them. So there's things that I had to like kind of learn along the way, but I never felt pushback from my administration in a way that was like, haha, we got you. Like you screwed up. So they're very flexible and let us try new things. And when they don't work, we're professionals. And so we tweak and make modifications and then try it again. And teaching is an iterative process, just like the things that we're actually teaching are iterative: software development, computer science, other things. So in as far as the pandemic goes and trying to teach online, that threw a whole nother wrench into stuff. And I just kind of tried to jump in again and learn new resources. I learned how to use OBS so that I could get information to my students better, think about new ways to engage them and get interactions back and forth. And it was a terrifying year of teaching, but did my best to do it there. So it's interesting because this is education, and being in the business world and demonstrating value can be fairly different implementations, I guess, is the best way I can.
So true, Jeff. And it makes me think, though, one of the common things that you and Nate and Teri had mentioned, there's this idea you got to work with other people at some level, right? Whether you're trying to convince them or they are with you. And so that kind of brings us, I think, to a question from the audience that Greg posted out there for us. I'll share it with, and then I'd ask Maria if you wouldn't mind kind of responding, at least kicking us off on the discussion. And the idea and the question, thanks, Greg, for putting it out there, was, I'll just read it. And it's, I think no matter the industry, you get a new job via networking. Companies want to hire someone they already know. Given that, what forms of networking have worked best for you? Or do you find there are better ways of switching jobs? So Maria, would you like to kind of share your thoughts on that with us?
Yeah, sure. That's a hard question. I think it's related to what we're talking about in terms of showing value with, connecting with people in general. I'll just comment about the previous question also, because I think I have a good answer.
Please do.
I have an answer that I was thinking about. Is that what has really helped for me is this culture of kudos. And I think this works in networking too, where I always make sure that I'm giving, props to whoever has been really useful for me and whose work has been really valuable. And I'm a little bit shameless maybe about asking people that I've worked with, if I did a good job, can you let my boss know, or can you let these people know, or can you amplify it? And I think if you do good work, then people are like, of course, yeah, I'll do that. And so that's kind of what I've thought about in terms of networking or promoting myself as a professional brand. But I don't do that really loosely. And I know that there are people that will just, add connections to everybody on LinkedIn. I don't know if that helps other people. I don't do that. I do get a lot of connections added on LinkedIn that I don't really respond to because I don't think that's an effective way of doing things. I would say I've never wanted to just find a job or change careers or stop what I'm doing, now. I've always kind of looked forward and thought, okay, what is the next thing that I want to do? So I'm not running from something that I have. I'm kind of running towards something that I want to do and keeping curious of what is going on around me. So if I'm paying attention to people's work that I think is interesting, I'll talk to them, but just to find more information. And actually some of the things that I've been able to do in my career have come out of conversations, just kind of naturally pulling on threads because I have a sincere interest, which probably means I have some good experience too for what I'm interested in. And that comes across to these other people. That's how I found my first position actually at the University of Chicago after I finished my PhD was I went to a reunion at the University of Chicago, a college reunion, and I went to a class, this like fake classes that they'd have professors teach during the reunion. And I was like getting a beer in the beer garden, and I walked in on the class. This professor talked to alumni, and he, gave a great talk about big data and sciences. And I kind of paid attention to him, just, I'd read his blog and that sort of thing. And I found, my next opportunity was through him. I saw something that he promoted. And so it's just keeping curious, I think, is really important. I read a book, I think it was Designing Your Life, maybe, and there was advice there about in your career, you should try and get lucky. And I thought, gosh, that's the worst advice ever, because how are you going to get lucky? But then I heard it in other contexts where people are saying, you get lucky by being curious and keeping that door open and asking questions and seeing, who's involved with what you're interested in and kind of pulling at threads. And you suddenly will find that you kind of get lucky. And so that's how I think my career has gone, actually. I don't know if I deserve any of the jobs I've had, but I've been really lucky, I think, kind of bouncing around and just being curious about other people's work.
Okay. Well, thank you, Maria. That's those are some great points. And I think it might be a good opportunity to kind of take our first question to the audience. And I before we do that, I will point out, Barry raised this idea of a one-job career, and is that thing gone by? And let's hold that thought, and we'll come back to that. But before we do, I don't want to lose track of this idea. Maria talked about connections and things like social media and all that. And one thing that I would agree with Maria's points on that, one thing it makes me think of is there's connections and there's relationships. And those are two different things. And in many ways, a very popular thing is this idea of mentors in our careers, in our lives. So it might be a good opportunity. Let's ask the audience. Alvin, if it's possible, see if you can bring up that poll about mentoring relationships, and let's see what everybody thinks. Well, Alvin, we've got a bunch of them there, but if we scroll down, if everyone scrolls down to number 4 there, and it says, I take advantage of mentoring relationships and opportunities in my life. If everyone could kind of share your thoughts, that we've given you 4 options there, and let's see what everyone thinks. I will point out these polls are anonymous, folks, so I feel comfortable there. We're thinking more of what the group thinks as a whole. So take that for a moment, and then see what we get. Let's just look at 4 here for a moment. And it looks like about more than half of us have considered the possibility of mentoring relationships, but not have yet taken advantage of those. So let me throw the question out to our panel. How many of our panelists here have taken opportunity to get into kind of mentoring relationships, or maybe just have a mentor, and those some can be formal or informal? So I see Nate, and then we'll go to Jeff. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was actually one of the, so I get a lot of mentorship from my boss, my manager at work. But the thing I wanted to call it here is I read a great blog post called, it's like the 5 different types of mentors or something. And my understanding of mentorship was always this big kind of like, you're going to have this huge relationship with this person. And it always sounded like kind of a whole thing that kind of scared me off, to be honest. But one of the things that really resonated with me was the idea of a $5 mentor, which is just somebody who's really good at something, and you take them out for coffee and buy them coffee and like spend an hour trying to get them to get you good at that thing. So it's like a very sort of targeted, just going after one particular skill. And I did that with someone on our marketing team. She was really junior on the team, but had a ton of influence and clearly like got our execs to do all kinds of things that they weren't going to do before she talked to them. And so she was my $5 mentor for, like influencing without authority. And it was really great. And we have this great relationship now. We co-wrote a book together. Like there was a lot of good things for me that came out of that. And it was all just sort of, for me, a lot of it was trying to narrow down the scope of what a mentor is and having it be more something sort of like targeted and applied that I was trying to get out of it on a sort of shorter, smaller time frame.
Mm-hmm. Teri, were you also going to comment there on mentors and relationships like that?
Yes, I have a mentor, and I have been a mentor for other people. I found my mentor through a job I had maybe almost a decade ago now, where I started, and we still are, colleagues in a way. We're both engineers interested in business school, and that's where we really connected. So I think, when we worked together and kind of hung out at work, we had chatted a lot about the business problems we saw as engineers and how we're like, oh, that's so obvious that, the people who are running the business side of things aren't seeing things that we are, even though we're technical people. So he also had some other experience that I didn't have. I went through, the college route when it comes to technology, but he was in the military. And I find that in the tech world, the military guys sometimes have, a unique viewpoint, or, they come from a different school. So I really enjoyed kind of learning from him. So like Nate was saying, we go for coffee or drink a beer, and we kind of hang out, and we just get along as people. So it's nothing that was too formal. It just kind of organically grew out of a work environment I was in. And then I also recently, in the last few years, there's a incubator that maybe people on this Zoom meeting are aware of. It's called 2112. It's an incubator, tech incubator, very similar to 1871, but 2112 focuses on the video, arts, and music tech world, which is where I come from. So I've been a mentor there, and basically working with anyone who kind of thinks my background is interesting and they want to pick my brain. A lot of it is young minorities, but I've definitely worked with a wide variety of people who kind of want to pick my brain. So I think it's an excellent form of networking as well. I never know when I'm going to get laid off, or there's an economic change, or there's all kinds of situations, and especially in the startup world, they move really fast, and sometimes they're not managed the best. So in corporate worlds as well, like powers change, companies go public, they go private, and you don't really know what's going to happen the next day. So building connections through mentorship, I think, is a great way to network, and kind of like, hey, what are you doing at your job? It might be 180 degrees different than what I'm doing, but hey, I'm gonna maybe take a Udemy course on that and learn more about it. So I think it's a great way to network and kind of just stay current and what are other people doing, because you can get really caught up in these little silos of the tech world because there are so many of them.
Yeah, thank you, Teri. And Jeff or Maria, any thoughts on mentoring and mentoring relationships?
I've been involved in some pretty formal mentor relationships in education, and also informal ones. The informal ones, I think, tend to stick more for me. But sometimes they're structured in schools. And I had somebody mentor me when I first started, which was 20 years ago. And that can be really handy. We have the culture of our department. We've built our department up fairly. It's been building up over 9 years. Went from 1 to 13 people, and so it was a very purposeful build, which we're kind of lucky in. It's not we get along very, very well. I don't know how long, if this will last forever, but I'm sure it won't. But we get along very well, and we make sure our doors are always open. So for teaching, everybody in our department knows that they can walk into anybody else's class, like metaphorically and physically. Usually metaphorically, the doors are open, so you can walk right into someone's class, watch them teach, learn from them, ask them questions. And we also invite each other into our classes to watch us teach and help us see what we might be doing wrong. And in the education world, is a pretty powerful, recording yourself teach is a pretty powerful thing. It's a little scary to do, but during a certification, a national board certification, I had to do a lot of it. And that's pretty eye-opening to kind of see yourself teach and notice what you do and what you would change. And so mentorship in education is, I think, important. It's a little loosey-goosey at times, at least in Chicago public schools it is. But also thinking about that, and I mentioned this in sort of the tech check before we started, but I have a company on the side doing AV and networking and smart home automation type stuff. And I've been doing this for 20 years also. And I think about mentorship with that because when I bring, usually the people that I hire to work for me, which is after hours and weekends and summers and stuff, usually they're old students of mine. And it's a really great mentorship opportunity to be a mentor. And I like to teach them new things and give them agency and give them problems to help solve on jobs that we're on, instead of just like taking over on everything. And so giving a little bit of flexibility and knowing that they're going to kind of make mistakes and learn along the way pays some pretty serious dividends in the end. They end up being very knowledgeable and experienced and not feeling like they have to worry about learning new things and about making mistakes. And so that's been an interesting mentorship experience that I've had that's been outside of education.
Thank you, Jeff. And I see we're going to ask, let's ask Maria a question, and then we'll go to George in the audience and see if George would be willing to share. But before we do, Maria, you had, when you started this discussion, when we were talking about careers and networking and all that. So what you described, was that a lot of that due in your own career to mentoring relationships, either formal, informal?
Yeah, I wouldn't say formal. I do some of these panels or events and stuff. People always talk about mentorship, and then I always feel like a slacker because I've never had a real mentor, like a formal one that I have that kind of relationship with. I really love that idea, Nate, that you were talking about I think you called it $5 mentors. What I have heard in general, it also kind of stresses me out to think of like, I don't know, if I was a bad mentee or maybe I picked the wrong mentor or that kind of thing. I worry about weird stuff. But I read this book that talked about, an alternative to mentors, which I think they called it a life council, where it's just kind of like 3 or 4 people that you kind of keep your eye on, or people that you picked out for different things in your career that you want to focus on. Like I have someone that I know that I go to if I'm going to prepare, for a resume, or if I'm going to prepare for next steps, or, my professional brand. Like I have someone I go to for that. I have someone that I go to when I'm thinking about like managing up, that I know is really good at kind of influencing people without having that higher organizational structure for that. So I really like the idea of a life council, because I think no one person can give you everything for an extended period of time. So that's my input.
Okay, and so George, in the audience, George, you put a comment in the chat line that you mentor one-on-one. George, would you want to share some thoughts with us?
Yes, I've done mentoring. I can fairly say successfully, in that people I mentored moved on to have great careers, but it was not part of any structural or formal program. This was just people I worked with. I happened to be senior to them technically in the organization, but I just helped them out, so suggested things for them to study that would help them do the job better, and answered questions and so forth. But it was not part of any kind of formal structure. Maybe that isn't mentoring.
No, George, I would say that is. And yeah, and I think even from hearing our panelists, there's probably more of what we call this informal structure of mentoring than there is the formal. And so we'll move on to some other ideas, but let me leave us with just 2 other thoughts about mentoring. And that number one is that what I would say is that there's one value add to mentoring might be, at least from my own experiences, and I think from others who have shared, is that there's a safety net if you have a mentor or someone you can kind of run some ideas past, or get some feedback in a safe haven, in that if you can feel comfortable kind of sharing some ideas and there's no ramifications per se. That can be a real value add in mentoring relationships. And then the other thing I would add is, especially since I see over half of our audience, we have not taken advantage of mentoring opportunities yet, but have thought about it, is you don't be surprised how many people are willing to help. So as an example, we have over 50 of us in here tonight. I'd be willing to bet if you reached out to one of the people and said, look, I noticed you this way, X, Y, and Z. Would you share some other ideas with me offline? You're probably going to get a response. And often those things lead to those informal relationships that our panel has all talked about. So we don't want to spend our whole hour on mentoring, but I think it's something that we should all consider and think about, and what value it might bring to each of us. But let's kind of go in a little bit of a different direction here, and let's go back to an earlier question about a single career path. Okay. And I think it was Barry, your question earlier about this idea that I've been in the same role or with the same company for years. Is that a thing of the past, I think, as you put it in your question. I'll pause there before I kind of ask our panel about that. But Barry, anything else would you like to add to your question there?
Basically, when I started at Oregon, I was shared an office with someone who was an electrical engineer by training and was not a programmer, and was doing programming, and I had to rewrite most of the stuff he wrote. But he told me that he was only interested in being in that job for two and a half years before moving on to the next job. And it seems to me that just the cost of training a new employee and getting the new employee up to speed is cost prohibitive if the person you're training is only going to be there a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, let's see what our panel thinks about these ideas. Maria, you want to kick us off with any thoughts about that? This idea, maybe we're with one place and training may change, or one job. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
I mean, I think this is just it's a personal choice. I mean, I did my PhD. It took me 5.5 years or whatever. And I kind of thought after that, wow, I don't ever really want to do anything for 5 years. Because it's just, people get bored, I think, of the work that they're doing. And if you get bored, then you should move on. If you're not bored, or it's something that can change, or, if it's something that you're passionate about, then you should stick with it. I mean, I think I heard some stat at some point where I think, millennials and younger stay in their jobs for an average of 2 years or less than 2 years or something like that. I'm not a person that wants to just jump around in general. And I don't think like, I don't start a job thinking, what is the thing I'm going to do next after this? And I don't ever think like, I'm going to do this for a couple of years and then bounce, right? That's not how I go into any position, but I do for myself, I try to keep curious. I see what's going on. If I'm interested in the work that I'm doing, then, I keep up with it. And that's kind of how I've just progressed. I haven't thought like I really need to leave here, but I just see, okay, this is something actually I've gained the skills that I want to gain, and I've contributed. I always make sure, if you're in a good situation, that I've left my mark and I've contributed good work and been valuable. And then I feel okay kind of moving on if there's something more that I'm interested in. I will say that I think maybe part of the reason why is to be blatantly honest, changing jobs is the easiest way to get a higher salary. I mean, it is difficult, I'll say.
Unless you're a teacher.
What's that? Oh, unless you're teaching. Sorry, Jeff. But if you're changing a job, then that's the easiest way, I would say, to get a higher salary. I mean, it's difficult when you're in one place and you're, to work within the raise structure within an organization. So I think maybe that's why people move around a lot. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and Maria, I like your point though about it's a kind of an individual choice. Yeah, you kind of started that way. There's individual choice, which I would wholeheartedly agree. And like Jeff, I've been in the education industry, both administrative IT and both as an instructor. And what I would say, even if you take teaching out of it, over my 40 years, there was always an opportunity to leave and go into some other industry and make more money doing the technical work that I was doing. It's just the nature of education in a lot of ways doesn't pay as much. So I mentioned that because I think it's important to bring it back to what do we know about ourselves? What do we value? And consider that first. And then you look at your career and where you want to go and make changes. And I think, Maria, you shared a little bit of that there. And so, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I think I can comment on this a little bit. So when I came out with a computer science degree, so this is in 1998. Was that right? Yeah, 1998. I had, I think, like 5 offers, different companies around the country. I felt like important. I felt I had signing bonuses and they would pay for travel. And I came to Motorola and they moved me and moved all my stuff. And my friends all watched movers come in and pack me up and then move my stuff and unpack it. It was one of the cool. I just sat there with a beer and watched people move. It was like, this adult life is wonderful. And then, so I started at like, I think it was about $45,000 or something like that. And then quickly within a few years, I got pretty bored at Motorola. No offense to any Motorola people out there, but it just wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I found myself in kind of a cube farm, and it just wasn't the right thing for me. And started jumped to like an internet consulting company. And then, like Maria said, like talk about change in salary. I just moved almost every year, either because of layoffs or the .com bubble burst or whatever it is. I just kept moving and getting a lot more money. And so within a very short period of time, I was up to around $80,000. And then I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I want to try something different. And someone told me they thought I would be a good teacher. And so I thought, all right, I'm gonna make a big life change. And thankfully I got a really supportive wife. And I said, I'll lose a lot of money if I do this. And she was like, do what feels right. And so I did it. She's a social worker. So that's probably, social workers are around to make teachers look wealthy. So I ended up changing careers, and I dropped down to in the low 30s, like very low 30s. But I never looked back. And what kind of cracks me up a little bit, Bruce, one thing you said, like, you have these opportunities to say, like, I always had this sort of back comfort area of knowing I had the couch to sleep on, of being in the tech industry. Like I could be like, well, this didn't work out. What was I thinking being a teacher? I'm going to go back and I'll go back into industry. Eventually I probably would suck at industry now, but because it's been so long, but that I had that kind of comfort in my first year. I got a Milo, can you come in so Larry doesn't bark, please? Sorry. I have a family I hired just for tonight. So I in that first year of teaching, I got offered a job through a family friend of doing software for a trading company. And he's like, you'll make a lot of money. And I kept thinking, yeah, but I didn't get into this. I mean, I changed to teach. I got to give this a shot, man. I can't do this. Pressuring me. You'll make so much money that you can do it for a couple of years. And then you won't have to worry about it anymore. And then you can go teach or do whatever you want and change the world. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so I passed the opportunity up, and the person that got hired in my place made $600,000 that year. And so I was like, I did it for the right reason. So it was a moment where I had to really check myself. But I still don't regret it. I tell my students about that because partially they think I'm nuts, but partially I think it's a good life lesson. But I still no regrets on it. You reach a place where you can be comfortable with the money. Teachers are not paid well. It's not like you're going to go out and make a couple $100,000 a year or something like that. But you make enough to do the things that you want to do and support yourself, and it can be a really, really rewarding career. So it was a massive change, but I don't regret it. And just as a one quick little thing, Barry, I think on your comments about sort of like, are people like staying in a company forever? There's a great PBS documentary called Silicon Valley, which unfortunately highlights, I think it was Robert Noyce is the one that had some really terrible ideas later on race and other things. But it's about the start of Silicon Valley and about how these like people that started almost like the first startups changed the idea of like, I'm at a company now, I work here until I retire and then I'm done. And they sort of started making this jump to try something new. And that created a shift. If I remember correctly, it's worth watching. It's a good documentary. I show it to my students.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm gonna, we're getting close to near the end here. I want to make sure we get in at least a couple more questions. So Nate and Teri, now we're going to kind of up the ante here and ask some tougher questions. So I'd ask the two of you to respond to this next one. And this comes from Isaiah. And Isaiah has this question that says, so most of us are not happy about where they work and or what they do. Is it the work/job or the working environment? Nate, Teri, how do we make sense of that? How do we figure out if it's actually we're not happy with our work or we're not happy with our company, and what should we do?
So, sorry, do you want to go, Teri?
No, you can go first.
Okay, so I'm super lucky. I really like my job. I really like the place I work at. I didn't expect to be here 11 years when I was I was going to be a professor. I had this like teaching gig lined up at Northwestern. It was going to be great. And then I started talking to our CEO and got all excited about it. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. And I really liked it. I expected to be at neuroscience for a couple of years and I'm still there. And for me, I've continued to really like the people that I work with and the problem we're working on. And a few years into it, I started to get bored of the engineering side. I went to grad school, like neuroscience is my only job. The code I wrote was like sort of researchy code. And then the problems I was excited about working on were more at the sort of like conceptual drawn boxes and diagrams and that kind of stuff level. And that's where I had more unique expertise. And we started doing a better job hiring engineers, and we started hiring all these fantastic engineers that could code circles around me and actually knew AWS and all this sort of stuff we were moving into. And so for me, it was like I could feel that just the engineering value I was offering was sort of dropping. And I think it's good to think about like your value as a delta against somebody else. And it was sort of like, I'm just a standard engineer here. And there's a lot of like, it shouldn't be me. We should hire some engineer who's really great engineer and they should do engineering and they'll do a better job of that than me and they'll enjoy it more. And so what I started doing then was looking at, but I still like the people I worked with and I still like the problem. And so that's when I started moving into the product because there was a lot of need there and there was a lot more value I could add. And that was the product side and the kind of chief scientist-y stuff is more where I have like unique value against people. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I have good intuitions and problem solving abilities and that kind of stuff. So for me, it was trying to keep the parts and I was lucky to be able to like keep the parts I did like, the people and the mission of the company, but go to a place where it was more, I felt kind of like my unique skills as a person in the world. I was able to spend more time doing that kind of stuff. And so that transition within the company worked out really well for me.
How about it, Teri? What do you think?
Yeah, this is kind of a question that's near and dear to my heart. Working early in my career, I often sought change and or a different organization, either due to economic reasons. I entered right after undergrad, or actually I was still in undergrad when 9/11 happened, which affected our economy very similar to, what we're going through now. I also worked during the Great Recession from 2008 to 2009. And, things sometimes just grind to a halt and you have to move on. So I don't know if anything is really stable. And oftentimes, too, it depends the organization you're with. Sometimes you could have a manager that maybe he or she has their job because they've been there the longest, maybe not because they have the best leadership skills. Or you might have someone at the very top making decisions at the executive level. And again, they could be there for a cultural reason, or maybe they're the brother of the founder if it's a startup, and maybe they don't really know what they're doing and it's rolling downhill and you have to deal with it at your level and it's frustrating you on a daily basis and causing you undue stress. So you have to assess all of those situations and be like, hey, like I just have to go and apply for jobs and interview and find a new job. I can't stay here forever. It's not healthy for me. So you have to kind of do that assessment. And there's plenty of that out there. I've been through that. But then there's also times, like I had mentioned, I was working at a startup, 2009, 3-person startup, and I was doing front end development and some other kinds of technical work as well at a startup in the West Loop. And my manager, like basically the guy I worked for who owned the company, came in one day and was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay you in a month. Like things were just grinding to a halt at that time. The banks were running out of money. I mean, that was like, like the great crash, So I was like, I have to figure out how I'm going to pay my rent. I can't, I like working here, but I don't have a paycheck in 2 months. So I got to go figure it out. Right. So, and then there's also the maybe I can bring a skill set here if it's like a toxic or broken environment. And you're like, maybe I can bring a certification or my own skills here and fix a problem and say, hey, I brought value, I fixed this problem. And then that can hopefully make the environment better. So it kind of depends on how much effort you want to put in that environment and how it can potentially affect your career. I've done quite a bit of that over the years. When I was starting out, I was like fixing some really rudimentary technical problems. I was an IT manager at DePaul University, working at the School of Music, and I was doing things like programming phones and rewiring outlets, which are very basic power and electrical work. But at the same time, like people have to make phone calls to each other. So it's like, I have on my resume, configured and managed a PBX system, which I didn't have on my resume before. Even though that's probably below my skill set, it was definitely something that I took upon myself to solve. And, I have it as a skill set. So you got to kind of assess those things and determine if it's going to be a fit for you and what your next move is. So good luck with that.
Thank you, Teri. So I'm looking at our clock. We're getting near end out of time. So what I'd like to do is 2 things. One, I want to put our panelists on a pause here and ask you to think about this question so you can close out our meeting for us. So the 4 panelists will give you one takeaway thought that you want to leave us all with, okay? So take a moment to think about just one thought that you think is really essential for us to all leave this meeting with. And in the meantime, I'm going to go to Mark and Alvin. And Mark and Alvin, I'm sure I've missed a number of questions on the timeline. They'll be in the chat, and there's certainly opportunity to follow up after the meeting. But Mark, is there one in particular you think is worth noting here before we close up for the evening?
Yeah, sure. A lot of good questions, but I think this is a great one. It's from Herman. How do you become a better, more experienced engineer if your current job is not growing your skill set? And how can you job hop to a position you want if you lack the skills required?
Any of our panelists want to jump on that one?
I can potentially. I've been a sales engineer and I've been an IT engineer. So engineering's a huge field. So I don't know exactly which engineering field you want to go into or what you're in. There's, like civil, electrical engineering, computer engineering, software engineering. What I would do is a few things. I would, if you don't have any money, I would volunteer for a professional organization and do projects for them to build your resume. When I was younger, kind of getting started, I was before of ACM, I was part of the Audio Engineering Society for 13 years. And I was a part of a panel, I volunteered through the organization and basically designed websites to build my website design skills. So I learned how to do CMS programming and web design and things like that. I'd also suggest networking, these events are great, meetups, potentially, finding other kinds of professional organizations to go in person, happy hours, those sorts of things are always good. Certifications are great, free or paid. If you can if you have an employer that gives you tuition reimbursement, maybe go towards a graduate certificate, depending on where you are in your educational journey. Think about continuing education. I've just completed my second master's degree 2 years ago. So I'm always kind of learning and trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. So I'm a big proponent of doing that, but obviously that takes effort as well. You can't just go to the and get the course and not do any of the like career development, applying for jobs, using the career center at the university potentially. And then if there's, you can always look at LinkedIn and see what other people have done. If you see someone that has a job that you want, I think Maria was alluding to this before, you can kind of look at someone else's background and say like, oh, well, they worked at these companies, they took these steps, they have this kind of degree, and I want that kind of job, and see if you can emulate that or fit that into your career story. That's probably what I would do. Again, it could be very specific to, what engineering field you're in. Because from my understanding, because I have more of an informatics and information systems background, and I guess you could say physics and electrical engineering from my audio engineering background. But sometimes those career paths can be very specific. I know the engineering program sometimes, like I've applied and they've rejected me during my master's degree. So I know that sometimes, they can be very particular depending on the field you're in.
Thank you, Teri. Okay, we're out of time. I'll mention from personal experience, I teach, and I'm notorious for going way over my time here, and my students are often too kind and they hang with me as long as I'm talking. So I want to be cognizant of our time. Let's get some final thoughts or takeaways, if you will, from our panel. And Jeff, would you mind kind of kicking us off with what you'd like us to leave this meeting tonight with?
The education world is very different than the other world, than the non-education world. But that doesn't mean that there is an opportunity for career growth in there. One thing that was kind of cracking me up a little bit, in the poll, one of the questions in the poll was, are certifications important? And it made me think about how can you please quiet Larry? Sorry, our dog is whining. I have a certification to be a principal or administrator, and I hide it. And I was thinking, is that a thing in the corporate world where I have a thing that would make me more money and potentially could make you more, like, could give you access to other jobs, but I don't want people, I jokingly keep it quiet. And when I got the job that I have now, they did not know that I had that certification, because I don't want to be a principal. I don't want to be an administrator. And I didn't want to be hired with the expectation that I wanted to move into that, because I just wanted to teach. So I thought that was kind of unique. And then also the last career move I did was lateral. So I did no money. We were talking about how do you make more money, jumping jobs. And that's why I joked when Maria said that, because it was, I'm in a union position in a public school environment. And so when this other school came to me and said, hey, we want to bring you on and help you grow the department and make computer science a pillar of the school and build up great stuff and give you flexibility and create new courses. That's the stuff that got me to jump. And it was for the exact same amount of money. So at least in the world of education, or at least in union education and public schooling, money will not be the motivator. But I had to take a gamble and say, okay, that sounds fantastic. That's exactly what I want to do with my career. I'm going to take that risk. And I made the jump, and it paid off. And it didn't pay off financially, but it paid off because all the things that they told me they were going to be able to do, we did. So I guess the takeaway is that the education world is different than the corporate world, for better or worse. But if anybody ever wants to talk about that more, or if you're thinking about a career change and it involves going into education, I suck at a lot of things, but I don't think I suck at changing careers into being a teacher. So if you want to talk about it, you can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to give an ear to bend or add advice if I can.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Nate, what do you want us to leave this meeting with in mind?
I always harp on soft skills. I think that's like my thing. Am I at least like in the software engineers that I work with and involved in interviewing, there's a level of sort of technical competence you hit, and then you have to hit that, and it goes up as you move up in your career. But there's a lot of people that hit that, and the ones that are most successful in neuroscience and the ones that I always want to work with and are, get them excited about the idea. It's always that sort of level of social skills of being able to communicate and collaborate and push on things and drive themselves. Like, it's all that other kind of stuff that really, in my opinion and experience, separates the solid engineers from the really fantastic ones. So I think I don't think there's a ceiling for that soft skill side, and you can just continually invest there and get better. And I think it's always really impactful for your career.
Thank you, Nate. Well, let's hear from Teri, and then we'll finish with Maria. Teri, what final thoughts do you want to leave us with?
I think what was said before me, those are all really good points. For me, I have a genuine interest in computing and technology. So I wake up every day and I'm a pretty fulfilled person. So I think some people are drawn to this industry and rightfully so, jobs can be a little bit more stable, a little bit more lucrative. Obviously, I've been at this long enough to kind of see, for instance, how smartphones have changed. Now we have more software developers and front-end developers than I've probably ever seen before that time. And obviously cloud computing as well would be another thing, at least in industry. So I would say you need to be somewhat personally fulfilled. If you don't really like this world, it's going to be tough if you don't generally like it. If you do like it and you're working, I come from a background. Obviously, I'm a minority in the industry. I think it's no secret that there's issues with struggles with diversity in the industry. Obviously, there's the battle between what the financial results of having a diverse team versus trying to change cultures of certain organizations that may have been traditionally not very diverse, and they're trying to diversify it. There's a ton in the media about it. So if you are a minority, I would say don't get frustrated. Just kind of keep going. At the end of the day, people are going to identify you as somebody who is good at what they do. They're going to want to hire you. So I would say as well, be patient with yourself. Don't get frustrated. Oftentimes, there's a huge gap in leadership management, and obviously we have economic and politics in play as well. I mean, look at the pandemic and how that's affected jobs across the board. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Teri. So, Maria, we'll let you give us final thoughts and your ideas around what we should walk away with tonight.
Sure, quick. My thought is do what you want. I love, Jeff, what you said about not using that certification. I think on your resume or when you're applying, one of my old advisors gave me this advice that it sticks with me all the time in all aspects of my life, is never be afraid to throw away something that no longer serves you. And I think he was talking about some technology that he didn't like that we wanted to move off of. But I think about it all the time. I'm like, is this career serving me? Is this hobby group that I'm in? Is it something I'm still interested in, or am I doing it because I think I'm supposed to be? So never be afraid to throw away something that no longer serves you, and then balance that with think about when you're changing careers or thinking about other careers, not so much as running away from something, but running towards something that you're really interested in. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Maria. And I'll just note, I'll have one last thought, and then I'll go back to Alvin to make sure we take care of any housekeeping things for the meeting and future things. But I would, first of all, thank all the panelists for all your insights and sharing with us tonight, and then to the audience as well for just being with us tonight and sharing your thoughts and those pieces as well. If I could add my final 2 cents, I would say to certainly take advantage of things like we're doing tonight as it relates to career. I think you'll get more out of it than you'll be surprised how much you'll get out of that. And the other part is I would suggest a simple exercise we might all consider is take a moment one evening or one afternoon and make a short list of those things that you value. What brings meaning to you and what do you value? And that list may be very short, but I think you'll find it will provide some help and direction when we kind of translate that into career, and it goes from there. I think this will kind of bring a formal end to this part of the discussion tonight, and I'll turn it back over to Alvin to make sure we take care of any of the other things, housekeeping, future meetings, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so great. Thank you, Bruce, thank you, panelists, and thank you, Bruce, for helping to moderate this panel. It was really, really great and very, very good questions. Just final thoughts, just some final things is that, as you see on my slide here, we have our YouTube channel. So once again, please subscribe, boost our subscriber. Yes, that's our video site. And then also as well, like we mentioned about, tonight about mentoring and networking. ACM Chicago is a great venue for that. Being chair here, I've learned so much. I met so many people, many panelists, many speakers, and the people I've been working with in the executive committee. It's a great way to use your skills, especially if you're someone that wants to gather some new skills. And even some soft skills as well that Nate mentioned about. So we have lots of, opportunities as you see here on the slide. So if you're really interested in helping out and giving back, really giving back to the community, I mean, that feels very, very rewarding to always give back to the community, communicate, contribute your skill sets. So please get in contact with us. And also as well, if you want to be a speaker, to speak on your particular topic, please let us know as well. We're looking for speakers for the coming year, starting September when we resume. So you can email us at vice-chair at chicagoacm.org or chair at chicagoacm.org. And with that, yes, that is it. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here this evening. Recording will be provided for you after this. And enjoy the rest of your summer and stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, Alvin.
Give yourself a round of applause.